All right. So here is the first entry in a series of YouTube talks on poetry that you're going to be watching and commenting on throughout the semester. And this material will also find its way onto exams. All right. And so the first poet we're going to be looking at today, and if you go into the content folder and go to the running PowerPoint, go to the content folder, scroll down to running PowerPoint, you'll find our PowerPoint slides for this semester. And the first one in there should be the one that it's about it's an introduction to the poet that we're looking at today, okay? So go to the content folder, go to scroll down to running PowerPoint, op- open that link and look at the first slide. And the first slide is about this woman named Sor Juana de la Cruz, who lived from 1648 to 1695. Now, she was a nun in New Spain, today known as Mexico. It was called New Spain then by the Spanish because they had recently taken it over, right? And so, but Sor Juana, she was Mexican, Spanish person living in Mexico. She was born illegitimate, and so her parents were not married, which was that had a bigger stigma attached to it those days than it does today, right? So life would have probably been harder for her in society because her parents were not married. Thankfully, it looks like her grandparents raised her. She learned to read in her grandfather's library, which again, in earlier times, it was harder in a lot of cultures for women to get a formal education, right? And so her education came hanging out in her grandfather's personal library. Now, Sor Juana, and hopefully, if any of you are Spanish speakers, I may be butchering some of my pronunciation, so I'm sorry for that. But Sor Juana entered a monastery, when she came of age, when she was old enough, which was, in her teens, she went to live in a monastery to be a nun, likely to find a safe environment to continue to study and write. This, you may be like, huh? But this seems to happen frequently throughout history. There are many examples that you can point to of where men and women, but particularly it sticks out when women did it, of where women actually became nuns so that they could have more freedom. You're like, become a nun so you can have more freedom? Yes. So they could have more freedom to pursue their own interests. Because if they had stayed outside in the regular public life, they would have been expected to get married and have kids, and spend their lives, doing what a housewife does, right? Especially if they were just, ordinary people, If you were royalty, you had a little more liberty, you had servants to watch your kids and stuff. But so, not infrequently, throughout history, we've seen, you see women who have gone into convents so that they would have a place to think and read and write and study and paint, So there's a recent example within the last century, Sister Wendy, who was a famous art critic, who specifically became a nun as a way to give her more freedom to study art. And she ended up having a couple of television shows and becoming kind of famous, as this nun who knew about art. But it's kind of like becoming a nun gave her that freedom to focus more on art. And so Sor Juana became a nun and didn't have all the normal expectations placed on women, and so she had more freedom to write that way. She was a poet who wrote, among other things, 65 sonnets, And we'll talk in a bit about what exactly a sonnet is when we look at one of her sonnets. Now, I said that women, you know, and even men sometimes would go into monasteries and convents. A convent is a monastery for women, right? For nuns. They would sometimes go into them to get more freedom, but of course there were also restrictions in that life. And eventually Sor Juana became popular enough as an author with other, people outside the convent reading her poetry and stuff. And she also didn't like just writing about religious themes all the time. So she wrote love poetry and other things, which some of her religious superiors were not cool with that. And so she actually got rebuked by her religious superiors at one point for her worldly interests. And as a result of that, she wrote something, she wrote her famous Response of the Poet, which is an essay in which she strikes a posture of humility. The theme is how humble she is, how sorry she is, and how she's going to try to not have as worldly of interests anymore. But in fact, she kind of defends herself through a display of her style and wide learning. And so in this essay, even as the essay is about her apologizing, she displays what an amazing writer she is, and also displays how much learning she has from all that time spent reading books, right? And so it's kind of one of these interesting pieces in which she's apologizing, but in another way she's sort of just showcasing what an amazing writer she is and what an amazing thinker she is. And so we're not going to be reading that essay in class, but it is in our textbook if you wanted to go read it. All right, let's go look at one of Sor Juana's poems. So there's the link right there on the slide. And also the link is here in the YouTube video at the top. If you wanted to, you could just click on that link to pull up the poem so that you can read along. Okay, so I'll read the poem for you. Caprice. This poem was translated from the Spanish by Peter H. Goldsmith. If you want to, you can scroll down and you will find the original Spanish version. Again, for any of you who happen to be able to read Spanish. I'm not even going to attempt to read that in Spanish to you, but there is the Spanish version below. So the poem is titled Caprice, which Caprice is kind of like, you can look it up if you want to, but I like to go for the sense of it. It's sort of like you don't know what you want. If you're capricious, it's like one moment like you're a little kid. One moment you want mommy, next moment you want daddy, right? And and you're kind of back and forth. So caprice is sort of like this back and forth in your personality. All right, I'll read the poem. Who thankless flees me, I with love pursue. Who loving follows me, I thankless flee. To him who spurns my love, I bend the knee. His love who seeks me, cold I bid him rue. I find as diamond, him I yearning woo, myself a diamond when he yearns for me. Who slays my love, I would victorious see, while slaying him who wills me blisses true. To favor this one is to lose desire, to crave that one, my virgin pride to tame. On either hand, I face a prospect dire. Whatever path I tread, the goal the same. To be adored by him of whom I tire, or else by him who scorns me brought to shame. You're probably like, whoa, okay. Let me unpack this poem again. Okay, first, on a very simple, basic level, what's a sonnet? A sonnet has 14 lines, okay? Even most people today, a lot of the other requirements for a traditional sonnet, most people today don't pay any attention to those requirements, but most people still are like, okay, if I'm gonna write a sonnet, it's gotta have 14 lines. That's kind of the one thing, even in our modern age, when people are like, we don't want to follow tradition, people are still like, it's a sonnet, it's got to have 14 lines. There are some people who will write like just a paragraph and say, this is a sonnet. And I'm sorry, but that's just going too far. Most people today are like, if you're going to call something something, it needs to have some kind of defining characteristic. And most people agree that it's got to have 14 lines. But if we're talking about more traditional sonnets, not only does it have 14 lines, it has to rhyme. Now, there's also two other kinds of sonnet. There's two traditional kinds of sonnets. One is called the Shakespearean sonnet. One is called the Italian sonnet. And we're not going to... This sonnet is kind of a hybrid of the two, actually. One thing that is very Shakespearean about it is a Shakespearean sonnet always has a couplet, these two lines at the end, that kind of sum up what the person is trying to say. All right. But again, traditional sonnets, they've got 14 lines. They rhyme. And with the Shakespearean sonnet, among other things, you've got these two lines at the end that kind of like are the clincher, making the final point. So, I'll read this sonnet for you. Well, no, I already read it. Let's look at it a bit. Who thankless flees me, I with love pursue. Who loving follows me, I thankless flee. So she's talking about herself as a capricious person with her lovers, which she actually didn't have because she was a nun, but it's a love poem, right? And she's like, there's some guys, there's this one dude, and he keeps running away, and I'm in love with him. I'm pursuing him, even though he's not thankful, and he's fleeing. He's running away from me. But she's like, on the other hand, there's this guy who loves me, who keeps following me, and I'm not thankful at all for his love. I flee from him. Line 3, to him who spurns my love, I bend the knee. Again, back to this dude who just doesn't care that I love him. He's like, nah, I spurn you. I don't give a crap. While I'm on my knees to him, asking him to be my boyfriend, to be my lover, right? Line 4, his love who seeks me, cold I bid him rue. But there's this dude who loves me and is seeking me, and I'm just like, cold I bid him rue. If you rue something, you're grieved, you're depressed about it, And so I'm cold to him, and I'm like, you love me, but I'm going to make you rue it. I'm going to make you sorry you love me by being cold, right? Line 5 and 6, I find as diamond him I yearning woo, myself a diamond when he yearns for me. So good simile here. She's comparing these two relationships. She's like, when I try and, sweet talk this guy, that I'm in love with, he's like a diamond. He's so hard, he's like a diamond. I can't get any affection out of him. And in the same way, this guy that likes me, I'm like a diamond to him. There's no affection in me. I'm hard, like a diamond, right? So interesting simile that she brings in here, comparing herself and also this dude to a diamond. Who slays my love, I would victorious see, while slaying him who wills me blisses true. So the guy that murders my love, I want to see him victorious. I want him to win my love. The very guy who's killing my love, who's slaying it, I want to see him victorious, but I want him to conquer me, not kill my love, right? While slaying him, at the same time, I'm killing this dude who just wants me to be happy, with him. Line 9, to favor this one is to lose desire, to crave that one, my virgin pride to tame. And so she's like, if I loved this one dude, I would lose. Trying to love this one guy, I would lose all my desire. If I loved him, I'd lose my desire. I have no interest. I have no desire. But to crave the other one, if I want this other guy, this just tamed my virgin pride. My virginity that I want to give to this guy. I want to marry him, right? Um, it gets tamed. My pride gets tamed because he doesn't want me. You know. On either hand, I face a prospect dire. Whatever path I tread, the goal the same. Like whichever way I go, whichever way, whether I look to this guy or it's this guy looking to me, either way, the prospects, the chances are not good, right? Things end up the same. And then the last two lines, the clincher. You know, what's the results if I look at one relationship or the other relationship? To be adored by him of whom I tire. I've got this guy who adores me and I'm just tired of him. Or else by him who scorns me, brought to shame. So I'll either be adored by a guy that I'm tired of, or I'll be scorned. I'll be despised by this other guy that I'm interested in. So the whole point is this caprice, this back and forth, right? Of these two relationships. She loves the guy that doesn't love her, and she can't stand the guy that does. All right, so yeah, sound like anybody's relationship? I hope not, but that happens. That's a real thing. How not having a lover? How can Sor Juana clue in to the way relationships and love are? Because there are some things that are just universal, and this is one of those things. This has happened over and over through history where it's like somebody loves you and you can't stand the person, and then at the same time you're crazy about somebody else and they have no interest, right? And so she's tapping into something that conceivably she had like a secret lover or something, but I don't think she did. Probably she's read a lot and she knows this is the way people are, and she's tapping into this universal thing with this love poem. I say universal meaning a lot of people have experienced it. Not that all of us are this way. Hopefully you guys are not, because that makes relationships really difficult, right? Okay, so again, at the end there, post your 50-word comment. And again, a reminder not to AI your comments. If it reads like it's AI'd, I'll give you a 0 on the assignment and contact you over it, okay? And also just remember, take these talks seriously, pay attention and stuff, think about the poems, because this stuff will make it onto exams too. All right, thank you for listening, and come back next week for another episode of this poetry series we got going on.